You know, it's really cool to see an indie game made by a Finnish developer get big online, since that sort of thing just doesn't happen, with the only other examples of big indie games from Finland recently that aren't the topic of this video being Fear and Hunger, and Cruelty Squad. Happiest nation in the world, everybody. Ultrakill, aka the most accurate representation of Finland during the summer I've seen in a video game, is a first-person retro shooter developed by Arsi Hakita Patala, which is the correct way to say that name for the rest of the people on this planet who aren't Finnish. Where you play as a robot named V1, tasked by your mother to go clean up hell, which has become overpopulated due to mankind having been entirely wiped off of the face of the earth and sent straight into the underworld, now as monsters. And because the landlord will soon kick the people who sent V1 to hell out for bringing in more roommates than the contract allows, they want you to get this done fairly quickly. The beginning lines of the game, where V1 is booting up, explains this base concept in a much more cohesive and simplistic way. Mankind is dead, blood is fuel, hell is full. I didn't explain that second sentence yet. The interesting thing about V1 is that unlike most machinery that requires a set of physical phenomena associated with the presence and motion of matter that has a property of electric charge to work, V1 works completely off of fresh blood, which it can use to fuel itself after taking damage. This makes it probably the best possible machine for this hell cleaning job, since what you see as a hell full of monsters, V1 sees as the sauce packet bots at your local McDonald's. Armed with this basic premise alone, we're thrust into the game itself. And immediately I want to make you appreciate the sheer presentation of this game. This retro look that for once isn't overly pixelated and difficult to look at creates a very gritty feel to the game in general, but especially the beginning. You fall down to the bottom of a pit where all that meets you is an empty, metallic, and cold room, in which a few measly planks of wood stand in your way that you can punch off at ease. You move along these tiny hallways as the beginning credits roll and strange sounds start to rise in intensity, eventually leading you to your first weapon and with that intro alone, you know shit is about to go down. After this intro sequence, we get into the gameplay itself, which I can only describe as the most video gaming I've ever video gamed. The entire point of Ultrakill is to ultra-kill everything in your path and get through the layers of hell, so you can get even deeper to ultra-kill even more enemies. At the beginning, you're only equipped with this revolver that has a regular fire and an alt fire that lets you shoot a rail shot that's much stronger than your regular shot and is capable of piercing through 3 enemies at once. You get to test out this weapon and how it works on some weak melee enemies called filth, like you, and ranged enemies called strays during the first level. And already, the gunplay of this game is so fun. There's no bullet strafing on any weapons the game has to offer, meaning the bullets go wherever you aim them to go. Good heavens, what a revelation. But also meaning that you have to have fairly steady aim to use even the most basic revolver. This might take some time to get used to at the beginning, but once you start landing your shots, you start feeling your shots thanks to the wonderfully crispy sound design, the absolutely banging music that slaps so hard it's difficult not to feel like the coolest creature on the planet just standing there, and the physics of the enemies allowing each one of them to semi-realistically react to where you shoot them. Shoot their arm is now gone. Shoot their leg is now gone. Shoot their head, they're dead. And these factors combined together immediately make you feel cool, even when shooting the most basic shots at the most basic enemies. But what takes you from feeling cool to feeling like an absolute badass is when you combine everything I've mentioned so far with your movement. For a chunk of metal, V1 is extremely mobile and has a relatively fast base running speed and a slide that you can use infinitely, which makes you even faster. But the downside of constantly using the slide is that you can't steer yourself whilst sliding and you don't gain back the stamina you might have lost from dashing. You can do 3 short dashes in a row, after which you need to let your stamina bar recharge. And these dashes, whilst not as fast or long distance as sliding, can help you out in multiple situations, where you need to quickly dodge out of the way of an attack, or when you're about to fall off the map and need to quickly get back. You don't have to wait until all of your stamina has recharged if you run out, and can choose between waiting the bare minimum recharge time using up singular dashes constantly to quickly get out of a bad situation, or wait until the stamina bar is nearly or fully recharged so you can use the really fun moves that come with combining your other movement mechanics with jumping. Already, the base jump of the game is quite high, but you can pair this great jump with a slide or a dash for a slide jump or a dash jump respectively. And these jumps give you tons more horizontal speed and distance, with the downside of losing some of your height. You can also stomp on the ground from midair to kill smaller enemies, or, to connect what I'm currently saying to what I just said, immediately jump after the stomp, leading to an extra high jump. These movement options give you an insane amount of ways to approach or leave situations, and considering just how much can be happening on the screen all at once sometimes, and how much you have to dodge during even the utmost basic encounters, getting good with all of your mobility options becomes essential for getting through the game. Combining this immense amount of movement options with the precision-based gunplay gives you a game that at the beginning requires your full attention at all times so you don't perish in an instant, but after some time becomes a very balanced gameplay loop where you don't feel completely unstoppable with your staggering speeds, because you still have to slow down for brief moments all the time to be able to hit your opponents, at least at the beginning of the game when you only have the basic revolver. You get through the first level of the game fighting off basic enemies and learning about how all glass in the game can and should be broken because it's fun, how you can parry all kinds of attacks with your mere punches because it's fun, how one of the ways the game ranks you is based on style, meaning the cooler you play and the more varied fun stuff you do, the more points you get because it's more fun that way. And I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but I think this game's pretty fun. Once you're at the end of the level, you're faced with the Malicious Face, which is a mini-boss that throws more attacks at you than any other enemy so far, and probably served as some new players' first proper reality check to how difficult this game will be. And after defeating this creature, you've officially completed the first level of Ultrakill. Now we start getting into the really good stuff. See, throughout the game you'll be able to unlock, purchase and slightly modify multiple different types of weapons, all of which have their own varying alt fires even if the primary fire of some weapons is the same. Firstly, there's the revolvers, which currently consist of 3 different variations. The Piercer, which is the first gun we've already discussed, the Marksman and the Sharpshooter. Starting off with the Marksman, it's possibly the most infamous weapon of this game for its alt fire that lets you flip a coin into the air. And if you're able to shoot this coin from the air, it'll ricochet into an enemy closest to you, working as glorified auto aim for singular enemies that also deals the most damage a single revolver shot could do on an enemy by automatically targeting its weakest spot. This mechanic has so much depth to it, with you being able to split the coin in 2, hitting multiple enemies if you time it right, alongside a lot of other techniques that I'm simply too stupid to explain in detail. But just from the base mechanic alone, you can see how the Marksman serves as a perfect example of how cool and fun the weapons and mechanics of this game are. Then there's the Sharpshooter, that's alt fire when held down makes you spin your gun in your hand like a real boy cow, and once released lets out a bullet that'll ricochet off of surfaces for an amount of time depending on how long you spun the gun. Perfect for small rooms where, with the correct timing, a singular shot can take out a massive horde of enemies. Those 3 weapons are available for you to buy and use right from the get-go, meaning you have been given the tools for ultimate fun immediately. And this is barely even scratching the surface of the weapon variety of this game. However, the difference between all the other guns and the revolvers is that every weapon from now on will be given to you throughout the game instead of being able to immediately buy them. Case in point, the shotguns from the prelude. So you've gotten through 2 levels by this point, maybe picked up one of the other revolvers and gotten kind of used to the hectic pace of the game. Hell, you might even think you've already gotten the hang of it all and are ready for whatever this game will throw at you. You're wrong. During the second stage, you kept seeing something strange though. This weird yellow machine appeared every once in a while throughout the stage. First, kind of not really subtly running past a door that conveniently closes before you can really make out what you saw, and then after that a good few times definitely not subtly directly in front of you as it completely annihilates groups of enemies you might have had trouble dealing with up until this point. A possible force to be reckoned with, but it's probably just the final boss layer, or maybe even the game, innit? Nothing out of the ordinary happens in the second level, so you logically move on to the next one, where around a third of the way through there's a massive rock that you can't get past at the top of these stairs. Turns out there's actually another room at the bottom of said stairs that you might have initially missed, so you move down these menacing steps to come face to face with your inevitable doom. If the malicious face didn't give you a reality check for how hard this game was gonna be, the swords machine will eat you for a hearty lunch since it skipped breakfast this morning. It is the fastest and strongest enemy you've seen so far, and will kick the ass of first-timers. But once you've managed to get it down, you get access to the shotgun. That's primary fire works exactly like you'd think, however its alt fire lets you shoot out the core of the gun that works as a bomb, perfect for dealing with small groups of enemies and obstacles like the large rock on top of the staircase. The shotgun, much like the revolvers, also has a variant of its own that you can buy. The pump charge shotgun, that's alt fire lets you pump the shotgun a total of 4 times, with the more pumps you do increasing the power of your shot. But if you pump the gun too many times, it'll explode, dealing massive damage to the enemies around you, but also to yourself. There's an innuendo in here somewhere, and I'm not keen on finding it out. This gun is my least favorite gun in the game, but that is beside the point. I just wanted to acknowledge its existence. It deserves a moment in the spotlight too. After your first encounter with Swords Machine, you use the shotgun bomb to blast through the rock and continue on to the end of the level where you have to beat Swords Machine again, because you clearly haven't had enough. Beating Swords Machine for the second time grants you access to the exit, meaning you can move on to level 4 where you find out that the malicious face you fought during the first level is now treated like a regular enemy, spawning in rooms as casually as any other creature you've encountered so far. The two events in levels 3 and 4 teach you two important yet fun things about Ultrakill. Firstly, the smaller discovery of Malicious Face being a regular enemy on level 4 shows how previous mini-bosses that might have seemed really difficult by themselves before will most likely be put into future levels as regular enemies alongside the ones you're used to, getting you to naturally see the progress you've made by showing you how enemies that caused you a ton of trouble before and were considered miniature bosses have now become as threatening and difficult to deal with as basic enemies. And secondly, Swords Machine and its introduction in level 3 puts you in a mindset where if you see some insane looking thing or a massive seeming enemy in the distance, instead of thinking to yourself, wow, what a cool set piece, you'll instead be conditioned to think, holy shit, I get to fight that thing at some point? Since the loop of tease a cool looking character at the beginning of the layer, slowly get the player closer to said thing and finally let them fight the thing continues after this throughout the entire game. Back to the main point now, you get through level 4 and in the final stage are greeted with the boss Cerberus, which had also been shown to you many times before this, possibly without you even noticing. Once beating the stoners, if you may, you're done with the tutorial and are able to start the main game properly with Act 1, Layer 1, Limbo. And the way this section is done is so unbelievably good too. The entire point of this layer is to initially confuse you, because weren't we supposed to be in hell? And also, why does this section of the game look so unfinished with these easy to see borders around the levels? I thought this game had polish? But as you explore all that this section has to offer, you start slowly figuring out the nature of this layer. It's supposed to be the eternal torment of someone who could not get the full heaven or hell sentence, so instead got trapped in this completely artificial environment for all eternity. The speakers in the corners of the maps playing bird sounds. The borders are intentionally easy to see, reminding the people who used to be here of how they're never getting into the real world again, and the overly calm music that plays on loop constantly all serve as reminders of how this is not reality. This is the space in between. And you're never getting out of it. Also, this is just a really cool way to reason your level's borders, since the dev didn't want to grant the player too much movement space just yet, so came up with a clever way to restrict the levels whilst adding to the lore. You explore the now husk, demon, and machine-infested limbo as the place literally burns down around you, gain access to the nail guns, which are my favorite weapons in the game, but I'll get to them soon enough, and finally get to Claire de Lune, the final level of this layer. Here you fight V2, a robot extremely similar to you that was created for the purposes of working during peaceful times, in contrast to V1, which was built for violent times. The battle between the two bots begins, and turns out that violence is always the answer. Note, TheSyperior does not condone violence as the answer to anything, considering V2 is not that hard to beat. Upon its defeat, V2 leaves behind its actual arm that you can now use to shoot out this air blast, which is the coolest thing ever, until you realize it's useful for like 2 enemies in the entire game. However, the arm is not completely useless, as it's way stronger than your regular arm, making your punches much more powerful, allowing for easier and faster melee healing. So now you have even more in your arsenal to add variety into the gameplay, and with that I need to slow down. If I don't calm the pace of this video down, I'll have spoiled the entire game for you before you can say, no wait, don't do that. So to keep myself from spewing out every bit of info I know about this game, I'll just focus on the gameplay from this point onward to leave you with story and secret related things to discover for yourself. Like I previously mentioned, the guns we unlocked during Limbo were the nail guns, and these things are amazing. Their primary fire is to shoot out a bunch of nails really fast, and you can get a good bit of damage into an enemy if you're able to shoot all of your nails into them from the only weapon in the game with actually depleting bullets. But the downside of this method is that you have to stay fairly still whilst shooting these nails, and risk getting hit a bunch of times just so you can accurately hit all your shots. Is what I would say if it wasn't for the fact that the alt fire of the attractor nail gun is to shoot out this magnetic spear that attracts the nails you shoot out to it, and the alt fire of the second overheat railgun being to shoot out this massive barrage of flaming nails after a certain amount of charging your shot by regular fire. This changes the gameplay of these nail guns entirely, because now you can either shoot your magnet spear straight into an enemy, giving you essentially auto-aim as most of your nails attract towards the enemy now, or place these spears in a pattern far enough away from each other on the ground or walls to create nail traps that can damage and kill a ton of smaller enemies without you yourself having to actively do anything. And when you combine these magnetic spears with the alt fire of the overheat gun, the damage you can do is outstanding. Just shoot all your spears into a high health enemy and then shoot your flaming burst shots vaguely in the enemy's direction for insane damage. Also, the burst shot can be charged by shooting either one of the nail guns, leading you to be able to do even more damage on enemies. With this technique, if used to its fullest, aka shooting all your attractor shots at the magnets and then switching to all bursts, having the possibility of taking out half of any boss's health. The magnet spears carry these weapons so hard. The versatility they add to them is just nom 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 nom. And I'm not even through all the weapon options yet. There's also the railguns, which, whilst lacking an alt fire, make up for it by having their primary fires be completely different from each other. There's the electric railgun, which shoots out a large railgun shot capable of piercing an infinite amount of enemies and dealing massive damage. There's the screwdriver ray gun, which shoots out a drill that constantly damages an enemy until it runs out, making them spew out blood, giving you a walking healing station for a brief period of time. And then there's the malicious railgun, which is nuke. And on top of all that, there's the freeze frame rocket launcher and the SRS cannonball launcher, which both have a strong knockback inducing primary fire and alt fires that allow you to A, freeze and unfreeze rockets in the air, which gives you all the fun possibilities you can think of with that power, and B, shoot a cannonball slightly further than usual. This one's not very good, but you gotta have some mid ones in there sometimes. They can't all be bangers. And on top of all that, you still have one more hand, the Whiplash, which lets you reel in smaller enemies to you or reel yourself to bigger enemies, although using this hand too much will cause you to take hard damage, which decreases your amount of maximum health for a little while. So there's a few things at your disposal, and to survive some of the situations the game throws at you, you have to be able to use all of these weapons effectively and know their strengths and weaknesses well. But once you've learned how all these guns work, the creative possibilities of the weapons become endless, since they've been designed in a way where if you can think of a thing to do with a weapon or a combination of two weapons, you can probably do that. Now, fair enough, some of you may be thinking I'm going a bit overboard with that statement, since I'm the type of person to talk about a leaf with the same amount of intensity and exaggeration I'm speaking with right now if the leaf has really good world building. But I don't think I'm over-exaggerating much with my statement about Ultrakill's weapon options. Because in this game, you can ricochet a railgun shot with a coin, shoot a coin at just the right time to make it explode on an enemy, shoot a cannonball, reel it back into your hand and punch it back at another enemy, rocket jump, jump on a rocket and fly with it, shotgun bomb jump, shotgun explosion jump, fist bump Markiplier, shoot a ton of nails into one magnet spear and destroy the spear to create a shrapnel bomb, breathe, shag your nan, and much more. Okay, I'm getting a bit too excited again. I don't want to spoil all of the gameplay mechanics for you either, so I'll start slowing things down properly from this point onward. I've left a lot of things for you to discover for yourself, don't worry. But one more thing I'd like to pay extra attention to is this box. This is a terminal, the place where you'll find, buy and equip all your weapons, learn about the enemies of the game with these handy dandy lore boxes, find the cyber grind, which is just a pure fun fest of wave-based combat with no consequences, and get to the sandbox, which is exactly what you'd expect. Don't mind the Gary's mod map, but on top of these features, this terminal plays a very comforting old-timey tune whenever you're near it. And the contrast between the insanity of the base game and the calm of this terminal is something else. Before each major boss fight, you're given one of these terminals, mainly so you can choose your loadout for the upcoming boss. But the surreal feeling of having gone through an entire level of some of the most stimulating action and combat ever, knowing that the biggest challenge of the level is most likely yet to come, having these terminals here playing their calming tune every time you get near them gives you a moment where you can let yourself calm down, take your barely intact fingers off the keyboard for a second, and just have a vibe check, as Rasputin would say, I assume, considering I think this falls in the same ballpark as the vibe checks he talked about in his video, even though the game doesn't force you to experience them. And this vibe check is yet another fantastic addition to the game that allows you to actually take a break in the middle of all the chaos. God, this game is so good! Oh, and one last thing. There's secret levels in this game, and they are some of the best secrets I've ever experienced in a video game. I won't spoil any of them here, but goddamn, they good! Also, the writing on that one level... noise to convince you that the writing was very good. Okay, I'm done now. Outro speech, go! I've known of this game for a good while now, as I downloaded the demo for it all the way back in 2018 and played this at most 3-hour experience for 12 hours, meaning I was able to get into the full game fairly easily and managed to almost 100% the game in about 3 days, in which I played the game for a reasonable and understandable 35 hours. So overall, I'd say that Ultrakill is a pretty decent game. If you like shooters, video games, media, entertainment, living in general, I'd say you should pick up this game as soon as you can, and maybe even give fully completing it a chance, since the game is still in early access, meaning it doesn't have that much content in it if you play through it super casually. Although it is getting updated fairly frequently, and it's amazing no matter how you approach it. Also, all of the updates are absolutely worth the wait, since the developer cares about every minute detail of this game immensely. This has been another edition of Superior experiences a piece of media, freaks the fuck out over it, and writes a script about it faster than a human should be allowed to. Thank you for watching, please go try out Ultrakill, and and if you find this door in one of the levels, you should try to get it opened as fast as you can. Trust me, you'll love it. Okay, bye!